Electrification is changing dramatically. One of the key components when you look at the, if you're going to call the electrification ecosystem, is trucking with fleets. How are fleets currently thinking about electrification, and how do you see that changing over the next 18 months?
Well, it's interesting because if you look at electrification and how it's progressed over the last, 2 3 years. 2 years ago, everybody was very optimistic about, basically switching trucking to electric and zero emissions in a very short period of time. If you looked at the corporate goals back then, everybody was talking about 50% of transportation would be electric by 2030 and things like that. And then by 2040, 100%. Actually, the industry it has been recalibrating a little bit those expectations after facing some roadblocks in terms of the technology and the current state of electric trucking where it stands today. The batteries, they don't offer the amount of range that diesel engines offer, and the amount of charging is not available to the levels that it would be needed to switch transportation, at those levels. So I think currently there's a little bit of a recalibration in terms of what's possible in what time frame, and also a little bit of an expectation on not only the technical elements on how we make it possible, but also can we make it in a way that it's also profitable or doesn't affect the bottom lines too significantly, right? So how can we balance the two competing objectives of being environmentally sustainable but also economically sustainable?
You're right on the economics, because as you know, the trucking industry, from your background at Volvo, the margins are in some cases pennies. There's not a lot of margin for error or a lot of margin to move there. Is it charging, do you feel? Because obviously if you look at the passenger car side of the house, charging has made a very big difference, especially with Tesla. Do you feel for more fleets to adopt, say, a Class 6 or a Class 8 truck, there's going to have to be robust charging, especially on some of those well-traveled traditional trucking lanes? Is that going to be the big catalyst to move this?
I think that's one of them, but I think the biggest catalyst is going to be when the battery technology gets to a point where it's cheaper, lighter, and can offer longer range. Today, you have that big trade-off in terms of how heavy these batteries are and whether they take some payload out of the transportation capacity. Then how long of a range you get with that one route, and then also the availability of charging, which is also it's the availability, but also the power levels that are needed in order to sustain, as you mentioned, a very tight and very efficient logistics operation that runs in very thin margins, right? So how do you bring all those pieces together? That's what's proven to be slightly more difficult than was thought maybe just a couple of years ago.